guys, it's Ty with Ty the Dog Guy on the Daily, and I want to talk today about drugs. Not necessarily in the don't do drugs campaign, Nancy Reagan, 1980s, or just say no. That's what it was. I remember being a kid and being taught all about just say no. But anyways, not necessarily like that, but on certain levels very similar. Here's what's happening in the dog training world. It seems like every year more and more dogs are getting on drugs in order to hopefully modify behavior. Now I'm talking about, the same types of, like Xanax and I don't remember the names of drugs right now, but similar drugs that people take for anxiety or depression, things like that, are being given to dogs to deal with everything from aggression to separation anxiety, barking, hyperactivity, and a ton of things in between. Now, here's how it's generally being pushed. There's generally two groups that are kind of pushing for drugs. One is vets. Now, from the veterinary side, I get it. I might not agree with it, but I understand it. Now, I love vets. I think vets are great. I think we all need vets and all that good stuff. But vets don't generally have an expertise in behavior. Even veterinary behaviorists aren't very up to snuff as far as on how to, so veterinarians that have also studied behavior usually are not very up to snuff on how to actually affect change in dogs' behavior outside of, maybe a book or something. But in real life, they don't have a whole lot of, ability to change behavior. But anyway, so veterinarians are looking at the body. They're looking at how can I heal this wound? How can I neuter this dog? How can I treat this allergy? And so they're constantly looking at the body, right? And so when it comes to behavior, they've been trained to look at the body. Well, let's see, the dog's aggressive. How about we give him a pill to calm him down? So I totally get it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand it. And a lot of people would even mention that there's a large parallel happening right now, or has been happening for a while, even has names like Big Pharma, and, folks overall aren't terribly happy with the human pharmaceutical industry. A lot of folks aren't. And again, that's a story for another day. I'm not here to say if it's good or bad or whatever. But I will say that there are parallels. And so like I say, a lot of doctors, I believe, are prescribing things that maybe they don't need to. A lot of veterinarians are prescribing things that they definitely don't need to. Now, when it comes to the human medical stuff, I can't comment too much. I'm not an expert. But when it comes to dog behavior, I am an expert. And I am somebody that's helped a lot of dogs actually get off of medication. And I've seen what medication can do and has done. And some of it is positive. So sometimes medication can be a help, but oftentimes it doesn't, and I'll explain why in a second. But like I say, there's two groups. The first group are veterinarians themselves, and then the second group are dog trainers. Now, when I say dog trainers, I'm mostly referring to kind of this style of dog training that's come on in the last 10, 20 years. And it's been, I shouldn't say come on, but because positive reinforcement has been used forever, and every dog training program should have a ton of positive reinforcement. But there's this style of dog training that sometimes they call themselves pure positive or anti-aversive, meaning they don't use corrections or anything like that. And the reality is, these types of trainers are pushing for a lot of drugs and medication these days. And the reason why is fairly simple. You can't really train dogs very well using a just pure positive or an anti-aversive way of training. And so, sometimes you can, but most dogs with aggression or anxiety or some of the bigger problems can't really be helped very much by trainers that are just simply, pushing cookies and treats and things like that. And as a result, there has to be, something that covers the gap, right? And so, where a lot of these trainers are inexperienced or just have a big lack of expertise, they'll start recommending, hey, maybe you should go to the vet and, put your dog on this medication, again, instead of like actually training the dog with methods that work, they'll recommend medication. So like I say, this is becoming quite a deal because more and more dogs are being on it, more and more we're helping dogs get off of it. But the reason why it almost never works is because medication, at its root is like a chemical, right? And it's designed to help with chemical imbalance. So, somebody that's bipolar, for example, there's a chemical imbalance, and medication might be very beneficial to that person. Maybe not, it just depends on the person. But, it's a chemical imbalance, and so a chemical can help bring them back to balance. And the same is true for people that have issues with thyroids or issues with certain things that sometimes medication is necessary because the body isn't producing the hormones or the chemicals the way that it should. And that's where I say sometimes medication can be good for dogs too, because sometimes there is a hormonal imbalance, a chemical imbalance, T3 levels that are off, there's T4 levels, there's all sorts of things that can create a chemical imbalance that medication and drugs can actually help. And so this is not an anti-drug type video and podcast. But what I am getting at here is that the majority of behavior problems that dogs have are not chemical, related. And I don't know that there's ever been a study on this, and so I'm speaking anecdotally as someone who's trained thousands of dogs. Nearly every problem that we see is a dog who, it's simply a behavior problem. Maybe there's poor socialization, there's no correction at home, there's no structure, there's no rules, there's no leadership, there's no outlets, there's no exercise. I mean, there could be a million things that are wrong that are causing the problems, the aggression, the anxiety, the separation anxiety, things like that. But none of them are chemical related. It's just behaviorally related. So, just like a lot of kids, there's some kids that perhaps need medication to deal with ADD or ADHD. But some kids are just jerks, and just need to learn better behavior. And that's just the reality. And that's not making, that's not disparaging anyone with ADD or anyone that doesn't have ADD, or whatever the case might be. I'm simply pointing out that sometimes drugs are good, and sometimes drugs are simply there to kind of mask a problem. And the problem is someone who's not training their dog, or someone who's not training their dog with the proper expertise, or someone that doesn't understand behavior, and as a result, their last resort is like, shoot, I really don't know what to do. Let's get this dog on some drugs. So I totally get it. I speak with frustrated dog owners every day that, oftentimes they feel like they've tried everything, and that's a common phrase that I hear is, I've tried everything. And more often than not, they've tried everything but really good training. But they talk about trying everything, reading a book, talking to their vet, talking to their neighbors, getting the dogs on Prozac, that's what I was trying to remember earlier. But anyways, nothing's helping, because in reality, the dog doesn't need all these drugs and things. The dog just needs really solid behavioral modification, obedience training, leadership, stuff like that comes from really great training. And so, frequently we help dog owners get off drugs. Now, I don't claim to be a medical professional, and so when they do it of their own volition. I don't even give them any advice on how to do it. I wouldn't be able to. For example, I know that there's ways that you're supposed to wean a dog off of Prozac. You don't just do it from cold turkey. But that's not for me to figure out. That's for dog owners to figure out on their own or with their vet. But like I say, we've helped so many dog owners get their dogs off of drugs because the dog just needed behavior modification that we can provide through great training. So if your dog is on drugs, if it's meth, that's one thing. You got to watch out for that. But if it's Prozac or something similar to that, maybe your dog needs it. But have you tried solid training, great training, before going to the drug or since going to the drug? Have you tried that? If not, I would highly recommend you give a qualified trainer. And again, not to disparage an entire group, because there's plenty of, treat trainers that are good people and can do some nice things. But if you tried like a balanced trainer that actually knows what they're doing with behavior and with changing and modifying behavior before resorting to that drug. I hope so. And if you haven't, I hope that this gives you pause and something to think about.